complex and delicate structure, and you know, I've seen people with head injuries just get one knock in the head and they're never the same again. They get angry very quickly and have trouble thinking things through and all sorts of things. We're much more fragile in some cases than we like to think. And young people in particular think they're indestructible, but you know, they need to know that in some cases it's much better to wait and not take a chance with your life.
And 16 is a guideline, is it not? Like developmental, neural development. Ranges quite badly between gender.
You're quite right. Girls will develop physically, I think, a little quicker in their brain than guys. But even then, I think with both genders, there's sort of often a 2-year period where some will develop earlier than others. So, you know, it's kind of 16 to 18, or as early as 14, I think, in some cases too, right? So there's, I think 16 is generally accepted as the age where most physical development has occurred. So the number of conditions that could develop if the endocannabinoid systems aren't functioning properly is quite large. In part, I would suggest most conditions could be tied to it because the immune system is really based on endocannabinoids. The more they study it, the more they realize that it's you know, part and parcel. In fact, there's people that believe that THC is the plant's immune system, or it's what the plant uses for its immune system, which is why it kills bugs and all these other things itself. So you know, the plant's cannabinoid system and our cannabinoid systems in many ways mimic each other.
Because I heard that something silly. I heard that if people smoke it too young, they can get things like schizophrenia and stuff. And I thought later in life, you'd think it would do the opposite, because people with schizophrenia or other psychological disorders, as soon as they smoke cannabis, they would calm down and maybe those things would go away or be suppressed somehow. Because they give them scary drugs now that can do
for people that have already developed it, cannabis in many cases can be quite helpful. Unfortunately, there's some science to indicate that for people under the age of 16 that use it, you know, in what they would call some, you know, excessive way, or, you know, not just trying it once. Obviously, that's not likely to cause harm. But you know, a young person who's you know, smoking, you know, pot every day at the age of 14 is likely going to, you know, inhibit their memory, their, you know, other, you know, higher functions of thinking, and there are, you know, some indications that it could trigger schizophrenia when it might not otherwise occur. That's you know, really controversial, but
more studies.
You know, it's the sort of thing that, you know, I think, you know, young people deserve being warned of. Like, the last thing I'd want is for me to be going around saying, oh, you know, sure, some studies say that, but I don't think it's a big deal because I've never seen it. Well, you know, there's a lot of things that I'm learning yet.
But I'd say that the science, saying that the science proved that it can cause schizophrenia is a big fallacy. There's been some like correlational research suggesting that people who are diagnosed later in life with schizophrenia have used cannabis. But there's lots of suggestions that it's just self-medication. Like,
well, which came first, yeah. But there have been documented cases of schizophrenic episodes happening soon after smoking a joint. And it's really hard to say, oh, the fact that he was stoned had nothing to do with it.
I guess you have to look at genetics too.
The most recent study on schizophrenia and the correlational study was done in England, and they basically compared like the increased rates of schizophrenia, and basically said, well, with this like increased ratio of all these inpatients with schizophrenia, there's actually like a substantial decrease in the use of cannabis over the general population. So, you know, and in our population, so it doesn't seem to be a relation.
And there was no correlation in the mid-60s when we went from hardly anyone smoking cannabis to large sections of the youth population. There was no associated peak with that. Yeah. base levels of population can go up.
But at the same time, I don't think in the 60s we had as many 14-year-olds smoking as seemed to be now. I think it really was the youth culture. Not always, but really was more, you know, the older teens and people in the early 20s. I wasn't there myself either, but, you know, it's something that, you know, I just think youth deserve the benefit of the doubt, and if there is any chance that we should be extraordinarily cautious, and one more reason to legalize it and tell them to just wait till they're older, not to, you know, but at the same time, yeah, it's, you know, something where I try to say that the science is out, but this is what the Senate agreed to. Anyway, it was fun taking questions. Obviously, there's so much more on this topic to talk about. We could probably have a semester on it, honestly. But such could be said for the topic. Next week, I guess I'm talking about the distribution of cannabis in Canada for medical purposes. I won't be talking much about the MMAR and Health Canada's programs. There's an entire lecture devoted to that next semester. In fact, I think we've got a professor coming from Vancouver, so I'm looking forward to that as well. But yeah, I guess next week I'll be telling you about what's happening in this country for people on the streets. Thanks everybody for coming out. Have a great day. And so,